And I will share my screen. Can everyone see my slides today? Can I get a thumbs up for? No?
Yes, I can see the screen.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thanks, Roger. Okay, I'll get started then, because I know you'll all be excited to hear from Paul. So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Kiki Rees-Davros, and I'm a project manager for Mentor on the Welsh Government funded Smart Towns Wales programme. There's three of us, so you might have met me or my colleagues before. So like I said, I'm the project manager, and then we've got two project officers, Rhian up in the north and Sarah in South Wales. And what we offer is all kinds of support when it comes to smart towns. So expert guidance, workshops, some of them like this quite specific, and others more kind of general and introductions as well. So please do check out our Eventbrite for a full listing of these. We also like to share success stories, and also, you know, things that haven't gone so well as well, because we think it's really important for people to learn from each other's projects. And we also have lots of resources on our website. I'm assuming that you've all heard of smart towns before as you've made it here today, but what a smart town is just a urban area that uses information or data from different sources, like Wi-Fi systems or even seismometers, as we'll be talking about today. And the smart bit comes in when you actually take that data and use it to make decisions, to run things better across your town or even just across your business. So things that make up a smart town, your infrastructure, as we'll be talking about today, and then, like I said, the community engagement, business enhancement, eventually leading to improved services across the board, and of course making things more sustainable. So that's it in a nutshell. Please do follow us across our various platforms, keep in touch and sign up for more events. And without further ado, I will pass you over to Paul. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat. I don't know, Paul, if you'd prefer to answer them as you go along, or if you'll do questions at the end. What are you thinking?
Well, obviously, people are going to forget. It's best to do it when they think of them. But also, I'm absolutely terrified of the canyon-like silence at the end of the presentation. So if anybody does want to save them, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. So I'll keep an eye. If anyone wants to raise their hand to ask a question, I'll keep an eye on that. So yeah, thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn, a diolch Paul.
Diolch yn fawr, Kiki. Okay, I'll start off by saying this is the longest ever title I've used for a presentation. I don't know why I kept it, but it's the truth in a sentence. So we're going to cover why we're using seismometers and what they're doing, so that we can understand where and what might be happening in a town centre. So yeah, sorry for the title. Let's get going. Okay, this is what we're going to cover. First of all, I'll give a quick overview of us, but a really quick one. And then where we're going to go with this is we could have gone straight into seismometers and seismology and microseismology, but it was really important to give the context as to why we're using them and why we found them and what they're doing. So the first thing we're going to look at is where are we measuring, and get across to people what that actually means. Then we're going to look at why we're measuring. Then we're going to look at what we're measuring. And then we've got a really curious one in the middle, which is as dull as it sounds, which is what is a MAC address? It's important. We're going to cover privacy. And then finally, at the end, the bit you've all been waiting for, seismometers, and then seismology and counting people or vehicles and human activity. Okay, who we are, we're Kodergarten. There's 7 staff, all of us technical. We have a number of very sort of close subcontractors that deal with things from installations to coding to marketing, etc. We're based in North West Wales. One has managed to escape to Derbyshire, but we keep them on a tight leash. And these are the people that we work with or for. So we work with bus timetable data. We work now for the Department for Transport and for Transport for Wales, validating transport data, which is as exciting as it sounds, but it's very important, and it's just great. We work very closely with Powys County Council on a number of projects, and also we've historically worked very closely with Mentor, which is why we're here now. Other organisations that we work for are ADRA, which is North Wales' largest social housing provider, and we work with Cyngor Gwynedd, and we also partner with KPMG in terms of providing support services for the Department for Transport and TFW. We also do work for organisations that we can't mention, typically what's called DevOps, which is building, designing, maintaining and enhancing systems. Okay, that was that bit over and done with. We've been going for about 5 years, and we worked together for a long time in other organisations in the past. So where are we measuring? It's important for us to cover this because as we've gone through the process of making over 30 smart towns live, it's important to communicate for a number of reasons where exactly we're measuring activity. So what we are doing with Patron, which is our smart place platform, is we're in the business of measuring the busyness of town centres. Now, a town centre can also be called a CBD, particularly if you're in Australia, central business district, and it can also be called a high street. And usually it's an amalgam of the three. We'll be looking at some maps in a minute. The areas that are covered are done in conjunction with, if Mentor are involved, Mentor, also the county council, also the town council and other members of the community. So we'll cover that in a second. We also measure the business of beauty spots and visitor attractions, and also some really remote locations that have got nothing to do with town centres at all. This is where we are across Wales. So we're now collecting data as of last week in Powys, we're in Gwynedd, we're in Anglesey, and we've got ambitions obviously to cover more places, because the more places we cover, the more data we can share and allow people to use. Now, this is the nub of things. Okay, this is an example of what we are measuring. The red area that I hope you can all see on your screens is the area that's covered by the Wi-Fi, and it's the Wi-Fi that is measuring a core component of the business. So if you happen to be playing pitch and putt golf in Cricket, we're not going to know you're there. That's the place in the middle of the screen that looks like a golf course. The blue dots with the Wi-Fi icons are where the Wi-Fi access points are. So in Gwynedd, we've evolved to be able to roll out networks that sit on street lamps, which is why they're so beautifully placed next to each other, and why we've got such wonderful descriptions as street lamp ID 30. It's important to understand the area we're covering, because it helps to clarify where we might not be measuring, which in Cricket would probably involve the beach area more than anywhere else, or the green. And yeah, that this is it. But also for the issues of privacy and the legality of doing what we do, this map's important because it tells people where we're recording and processing data. Here's another network just to try and get this home to people. Those amber yellow areas are the only areas that we're measuring in Carnarvon. Sometimes it's budget, sometimes it's rather large Edwardian castles and town walls that prevent us from being able to measure other parts. But again, this has been done in conjunction with the town bid. It doesn't use street lamps, it uses buildings, but we're covering the majority of the key areas. An important thing in the Carnarvon map as well is, though, that there's a town centre, but we also have the idea of the gallery, which is the area at the top centre of our screen, which is separate to the town centre, but is a key visitor attraction and where the cinema, etc., is, and restaurants. And we've also got the new development, the award-winning development, Cyflwyno, which is run by the gallery, which is to the right of the the large Edwardian castle. So we've got the concept in Carnarvon of a town centre and two localities, Caerphilly and a gallery, which we'll see in a bit. And then the final one, Barmouth, quite a long high street. Again, you can see it's only a narrow ribbon that we're measuring, but in conjunction with the town council and others, this is the area that's there. One of the other reasons why we're only covering this area is because the funding was for town centres. So large swathes of the beach, the car parks, etc. We don't know what's happening there at all. Right, why are we measuring? So the thing we've used there is footfall, which is the count of the number of people in a place. It's clearly a key indicator of a town centre's health. The High Street Task Force has clearly stated that the majority of UK towns don't regularly capture footfall. It tends to be done as part of a study if they get funding for it, but this data isn't available. As well as footfall, though, we also capture information about why people visit the place, who they are, where they've come from, obviously with their consent. The elephant in the room here is that High Street has been competing with multinationals for decades, whether that's out of town shopping stores, etc. And for the last 15 years, it's been losing business to e-commerce. E-commerce is driven by data. The Kodergarten team come from a large organisation's e-commerce team, so we've been there. Now, this is where we divert a little bit, but this is some data that's been collected by a man called Cem. Cem lives in Istanbul. Cem is a biological scientist, a designer, a philosopher. He does quite a few things. But one of the things he's been doing for years is on his iPhone, he's been capturing information about his life. When he goes to sleep, when he eats chocolate, what his mood is, how long he's slept, how many people he's met, when he's delivered a work project. It goes on. We'll look at this in more detail. And then he goes to a coding friend and they turn this into data that they can work on, and then he creates these graphs. This is what Cem has to say. I'm not interested in the absolute values of things. I want to see patterns of increase, decrease, and the correlations between topics. Now, one of the things we've got to be, and we've always been brutally honest about this, is when we're counting footfall in a place like those town centres that we've shown you, those are not absolute values. If we think there's 312 people there, it's an indication. Unless you've got a room with one door in and out, being able to give an absolute value of the number of people in a space is extremely difficult, particularly in town centres. And Cem seems to have hit it. Now, where Cem gets interesting is here. So what Cem does with his data is he then takes out separate strands. So here's a metric of how many people he's met, his visits to the summer house, and his total productivity, as in how much work he's got done. And if anybody can be bothered to look really closely into those graphs, they will see that there's a vast correlation between him meeting lots of people and not being very productive, and him meeting no one and being really productive. It also ties in sometimes with his visits to the summer house. So he's taking these kind of distinct strands of data that's been recorded over time, which seem to have very little value, and he's able to extract some conclusions out of it. One that's a little bit more different is quite clearly Cem has an addiction to chocolate. This is something I've noticed for some time. And he's here trying in this graph to actually cover, you know, when he eats chocolate, when he doesn't, when he has it for breakfast, and issues with his skin, mood, etc. I'm sure you can look at this. There's a link at the bottom for you to go and have a look at this project. 1996, Tesco introduced the club card. Up until that point, the only businesses that really had a good understanding of their customers were high street businesses, because Paul would pop in and always get £1.50 of sausages on a Saturday, and somebody would go and get certain knitting patterns. The only people with the knowledge of the people who used their businesses was the high street. And then along comes Tesco and their club card, and all of a sudden they were able to build a profile of all of their customers. and what they liked, what they ate, when they shopped, type of value of their order basket. And it wasn't long before Tesco, although obviously it's for other factors as well, but Tesco became the UK's largest retailer. And next part of data and why it's important is this was our world for a good number of decades. This is what is called a sales funnel. This is what online business sees that the retail and the real world businesses don't see. At the left-hand side, we've got, this might be just over a period of an hour, that there were 69,000, well, nearly 70,000 unique sessions on their website. So that's people whose browser was using their website. Of those, only 20% were actually looking at a product, a book or a sink or a tin of beans. So only 21% of the visitors to their website were actually, they were looking at things. Of those, only 4,000 actually had added one of those products to their shopping cart. So you can see here this great plummet in the stats of people who visit websites, to people who are looking at products, to people who have added a product to their cart. Then it gets a little bit more interesting, because it then says out of the 4,000 users who were adding things to their carts, only 1,898 actually went to the checkout. And then the really bold statistic here, which would have raised alarm bells in our business, is that out of those 1,800, only 88 actually turned their session into a transaction. They bought something. So you can see the effect that data had, and how that worked in our world was that we had a much more microscopic view of that, and we could see where there might be issues. Everything was tested. It was tested A to B. If we put this promotion here, what happens? So e-commerce uses data. Data informs just about everything they do, from where a product appears in a list, to product price changes, to promotions, to marketing. So we're measuring a number of things at the moment. We're measuring other things as well, but in terms of what we're talking about, and ultimately seismology, is we're measuring the number of digital devices. So that typically means a mobile phone that are inside the area that we saw on that map. Okay. For people who are choosing to log into the network, and with their consent, we are also measuring, recording and processing the responses to the questionnaire. So where are they coming from? What was the purpose of their visit? Gender, language preference, age, to give us a profile of the type of visitors that come to that place. We're also counting microscopic particulates in the air, and now we've decided, I don't know if it's anything other than a sign of madness, but we're also measuring tiny vibrations in the ground. So those are the things that we're measuring in these places. And really the first thing we've got to understand, so it puts seismology into context, is how do you measure the number of devices? And I've got to give you all a warning now, as we've got a little session on MAC addresses. So it's a very short one, but it's hopefully as non-geeky as possible. But I am, there's a warning here. Right, so this is a MAC address. Okay, it's a number, and you can see an example of it there. There's a structure to it, so we can understand it. But that is what we're counting. And every single mobile phone has a MAC address. Yeah, every single device. Every single sensor has a MAC address. So there's one of our sensors that counts, I think it's CO2 on an entry. Even microwaves nowadays have MAC addresses. Yeah, so MAC addresses are ubiquitous, whether it's your car stereo, your television, they're everywhere. Now, why do we need MAC addresses? Well, here's a picture I prepared, beavering away trying to do this. I feel like I'm lecturing at the university. But if we've got two people, we don't need names. If we've got two people talking to each other, we can just communicate saying, hey, you, yes, me. There's no need for a name. There's no need for an address. We don't need it. If we start trying to talk to more than one person or more than one device, and we don't use a name, this is what happens. Yeah, so the interaction between two devices or two people was a hey, you, hello. When we've got 5 people that sixth person wants to talk to, there's no name, they can't communicate because they can't address. It's difficult. So what we're trying to do, obviously, is count. And all we know at the moment is that there's more than 2 people. We can't count because we've got no names, we've got nothing. If all of a sudden, if we give all of these devices names, something that we can address, all of a sudden Gwen, because Gwen's got a name now, can talk directly to Sian. He's got a name too. It means Barry, Ron, Stig and Dirk. There'll be prizes for anybody who can name that band. They know that the communication isn't going to happen between them and Gwen. She doesn't want to know them. She just wants to talk to Sian. So names are important when you want to talk where there's a large number of things. And we now know that because we've got all these names, that there are 6 people on this screen. Problem comes though when you get more than one Sian, which, you know, I'm sorry if there's anybody on the call called Sian. I'm sure having more than one Sian in the space is great, but when it comes to communicating, we've got a problem now because there are 2 Sians. So we actually don't know if there's 6 people or more than 6 people. And both of the Sians don't know which Sian they want to talk to. So in order to communicate with lots of devices, the names have to be unique. That's the issue we've got here. We've got no uniqueness, more than one Sian. So this is why we have MAC addresses, because a MAC address is absolutely unique. I think there's a namespace of 8 billion or something like that. So although there is the chance that sometimes the same MAC address might be in the same space, we're talking, you know, it's a very, very, very small chance of it happening. So back in the real world, this is what we're trying to describe. We're back in Criccieth. We've suddenly gone just down to the bottom, and you can see now that Sian has suddenly got a really bad mobile phone icon, and the access point's been named Gwen, and they can talk to each other because Sian's device has a MAC address, and the access point can see that MAC address and can communicate with it. So that's what I was trying to do in a very bad way, was try to get across that this is why we need these unique names on devices. So every time that Sian's mobile is seen on a Wi-Fi access point in Criccieth, there was potentially a record of where it was and when it was there. And this is the problem. You know, hopefully people can start to see straight away that we could start tracking Sian, which is a bad thing, because Sian's device is continually giving its MAC address, and we could see wherever the device was because it keeps saying hello over the network. Now, what happened was around 2014, so people can relax, is Apple were the instigators, and they decided that this was generally an extremely bad thing. So the systems now produce something called randomized MAC addresses. So we never actually see the real MAC address until the user logs in. So now it's not really very easy for anyone to track anyone using MAC addresses because the device could change its address every time it sends a message out. Yep, so that's where the idea of randomized MAC addresses come. So this is the important bit, but for us, this is a problem because now what used to be Sian is called Keris, and Ron's called himself David, and Stig's Nigel, and this is happening every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes, every half an hour. So now, even at that point in time, we don't know whether there's more than 6 or 11 people in that screen at that one point in time. So that's what randomization and MAC addresses are. It's there for our privacy. It's there to stop people tracking. But obviously for us, tracking a user is not in our remit. We have no interest in it. But what is in our remit is we want to be able to count them. So we had to go back to the drawing to look at how we could do this. And don't worry, this is going to be a quick summary of what we use. We use a different form of it because of the way the system works, but there is a specific process that was developed in Tokyo in 2020, and I think it's called Envision and TruePath or something like that. And there are other statistical techniques so that we can have an indication, even though we've got all sorts of randomized addresses, of just how many devices might be in that space at that point in time. Bringing now to getting closer to seismology and seismometers, this is the system we're talking about. On the left-hand side, the red element is the spatial bit. It's the place. It's the subplace, like a gallery. That place can contain many different elements, whether they're sensors, whether they're Wi-Fi access points, river height sensors, sound pressure level sensors. That they can all occupy this thing that we know as Crickieaeth or Barmouth or Ystrad. Typically, most of these devices, even the open source ones, go back to a central place. Technology kit goes back to a central place on the web. That's the blue bit. We then talk to the blue bit in Patrum. And Patrum is where we do the processing, whether that's turning vibrations into the ground, into traffic estimates, or it's doing the math to interpret the randomized MAC addresses, or it's storing, which is the grey bit at the bottom, the responses to the questionnaire, which are kept somewhere completely separate. Yeah, so that's the thing. For anyone who's more interested in the actual components, this is the flow that's come out of a well-architected review from AWS. So the big thing, though, for us is Flink, the box on the purple box on the right. Flink is this. It's the product that has helped us resolve most of the issues and has opened the door for us to be able to use seismometers. Flink is something that came through in version 2, and we're now using Flink to do things like quality of service as well, which is coming out in May, which means we will know when an access point or a sensor has gone down rather than waiting to be told. But despite all of this and all of the reasonably good maths and statistical analysis that we're carrying out on the Wi-Fi data to give footfall counts to help businesses understand how busy their town centre or their beauty spot is, it's not good enough. Yeah. What we mean by not good enough is this. We estimate at the moment, further to work we're doing with Bangor University, that the accuracy of our footfall data is very dependent on location. It's somewhere between 63 and 68% accurate, but I would say, to be honest, it's closer to 63, which means it's okay. And it's a damn sight better than any other method we can think of at this point in time of being able to count how busy a place is. But as the cat said, it's not good enough, because really what Kiki and local authorities and local businesses want is something that's probably, I would hope, between 70% and 90%, i.e. it's good. Something they can rely upon a little bit more than what we're able to provide at the moment. And we take you back to what my friend from Turkey had to say, which is he's not interested in the absolute values of things. He wants to see patterns of increase, decrease, and the correlations between topics. So, you know, we've accepted it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but we want to be able to draw conclusions from this data. So the new kid on the block that arrived when we were about a year and a half ago is the Raspberry Shake. So here's 5 of them being set up on my desk. The Raspberry Pis in very sexy Perspex cases, and as you can see, there's like a large electronic component, so like a cylinder. You can see in each one of them a copperish cylinder. That's the seismophone. That's the thing that measures vibrations. So seismometers are devices that measure vibrations in the ground. We discovered our seismometer in that rather gorgeous watchtower in Porth Amlwch in Ynys Môn. It's the headquarters of Geo Môn, the Geo Park, which Anglesey was one of the first ones, I believe. And being a geek, whilst we were installing equipment there to measure footfall activity in Porth Amlwch, I couldn't help but notice the raspberry shake there, asked what it was, and they described it. And of course, I did try then with Menter Môn to say, wouldn't it be great for us to measure earthquakes in all sorts of different places in North Wales? And I have to say that Menter Môn they were interested, but really, let's face it, how important are earthquakes in North Wales to the business of a town centre? Here's the data that we have in Porth Amlwch, just to show you on Patron. You can see that's for the last few weeks. There's the Easter weekend is rather obvious. Here it is on April the 23rd. So there's a massive increase. You can also see where the weather was absolutely appalling as well, which is a moot point, because we really do need to start bringing weather into this to help explain some of these discrepancies. Are they failure of service, or is it because people just are scared to go out for the fact that there's far too much water in the atmosphere or wind? So this is the breakdown of the raspberry shake. It's the smallest. It's also the cheapest by far. A typical seismometer would cost, like a university department, would cost about £35,000, and the installation and maintenance of it would add at least another £10,000 per annum, sometimes, just to keep that thing going. Raspberry shake is something, as long as you put it on the ground, is something, and connect it to the internet, that's quite important, is something that can start sharing data immediately. This is how many shakes you've got on planet Earth at the moment. That was today. There's 2,422 of them live. All the little red dots that aren't hexagons are seismic activity that the shakes are picking up. No surprise there that you can see Iceland is rather busy, Turkey, and the Ring of Fire along the west coast of the United States. Obviously, there are very, very many more, but I've taken a very Northern Hemisphere approach to this, and I've just did this because it looked better than the rest of the map. Here's Wales, and there's 3 of these are ours on the Llŷn Peninsula, and Porth Amlwch is the one up on the top right of Anglesey there. So there's quite a few shakes. The ones in Manchester are all run by the people that we work with now at Leeds University. So here's a typical geologist, I would imagine, installing a seismometer, because that's where you put them. The reason I've got this picture isn't just because I found it ridiculous. It's because seismometers traditionally are there to record the vibrations in the ground, so earthquakes. That's why Geo Môn have one. That's their interest. And to do that, you need to put them usually kind of that far down in the ground. And the reason they do that is because then the seismometers aren't picking up on something called anthropogenic noise, human noise. And that's exactly what we're interested in. And this is the bit where things fell into place. So after failing in my wooing of Menter Môn to get some seismometers and to measure earthquakes, and it was an absolute abject failure, I then discovered in conversations with the academic that what they were using their raspberry shakes for wasn't necessarily to just record the sounds of the earth. It was to record anthropogenic noise, the noise that human society makes. And here's the thing that really took my attention, which is there are a number of these. There's a brilliant group of people in Brussels, in Belgium, who have done a lot of this work. And this is what they discovered. You can see here, this is, I think it's aggregated data from a number of seismometers around Brussels. And you can see where the lockdown happens and how that graph just goes down. Yeah. So you can see the peaks and troughs at the weekends. Sunday's particularly dead in Belgium. But from March the 14th, when the schools close, it just keeps going down. And now we can go straight over to North Wales. And here's Abersoch this month. So we'll cover what we've done and how we do it, but here's how this looks like on Patreon. So here's Abersoch, and what we're recording here or what we're processing here is for the patterns of usage of vehicles. You can see the daily peaks and troughs, and you can see the nature of the change both between lorries. There's a bit of an etymological argument here on where the developers have gone for truck. It still upsets me. We've got vans and we've got cars, and we're able to pick up that because each of those vehicles typically has certain weight limits. It's there as part of the way we license our vehicles, and because they weigh different amounts, they emit at different levels of energy and at different frequencies. And we come with some functions that have been called Fourier transforms that have been provided to us through the academics. We're able to process the seismic noise and generate graphs that indicate the nature of the patterns of traffic usage in that place. Now it starts to get a little bit more interesting, I hope, if you're all still with us. What really came true is that last summer 200,000 people basically turned up in a field in the middle of the Thin Peninsula. And as a fortuitous accident, we had smart towns in all the locations that surrounded that. So we had smart towns, you can't see, but we have one in Aberdaron, we've got Abersoch, we've got Pwllheli, and we've got Nevin. And this one in the middle here is the location of the National Eisteddfod, the Eisteddfod Cenedlaethol. We created a temporary, yeah?
Sorry, we've just had a question pop up
Okay.
From Ashley asking, we have some big cars these days and small vans. How can you differentiate enough between the two types of vehicles?
It's an excellent question. You can, there's so obviously very, very large cars, being able to differentiate between a large pickup, which crosses over between personal use and private use is extremely difficult. But the weights of vans, so when we're talking about vans, we're talking about the transit style vans, Mercedes Sprinters, etc. So it's to do with vehicle weights, and most cars sit, even the Discoveries and the other manufacturers tend to sit underneath those limits, which I think is 2.5 tons. So yes, she's absolutely correct. If there are vehicles that cross over that threshold, then we won't know them. And likewise, the small vans like the little partners and things like that would be picked up as cars. The way that we know that the data is actually very good in terms of the standard is that these units have been tested in Manchester on one of the main thoroughfares coming into Manchester by the academics, where they have ANPR cameras, and those ANPR cameras can tell the vehicle type from the registration number. So they could give exact breakdowns of the percentages of vehicles at that point in time going past those cameras and going past the Raspberry Shakes. And the Raspberry Shakes were at around 90% accurate. So yes, exactly where Ashley says is probably where the 10% inaccuracy comes, which is small vans being picked up as cars and large pickups, or obscenely large, I don't know, maybe Hummers. I don't know how many Hummers turn up on the Thin Peninsula, but it would be extremely, extremely heavy cars. Yeah.
Just thinking with obviously the actual peninsula itself, how about big 4x4s pulling trailers with jet skis or boats? Would they probably be counted as vans?
No, because they're two separate. No, again, that's really interesting. It's because they'd be two separate vehicles, because it's different sets of wheels. So even though it's a trailer, that trailer has its own signature. So I would suspect that we would pick those up as two vehicles. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so this is where we are. The temporary spot, which is here, a ford, was because this is where Cyngor Gwynedd had created traffic diversions to prevent traffic coming through Pwllheli. And we thought that was a key location, which is, as we'll see, it turns out it was. So here's Nefyn High Street during the Eisteddfod. And what we can see here, we've tried to plot everything together on this graph. I'm still using the word truck, which, as I've already explained, yes, never mind. But we can see that from the 8th of August, which is where the Eisteddfod starts, these bottom levels here start picking up. See there, so the 4th, we've got the blue down here. By the 6th, the 8th, and all the way up there to the, literally, it grows. The traffic, the vehicle traffic is growing in Nefyn. It starts to dissipate here. Yeah, so we've got definitive patterns on the graph of changes in the volumes of vehicles that's going through Nefyn High Street. An important thing to say here is Nefyn High Street isn't really a main thoroughfare. It is used as a main thoroughfare, but the majority of the traffic tends to go turn right before it hits the high street, and we're not necessarily picking up on that traffic. To give a better indication of what happens over a spread of time, this is the whole of August, and you can see after that, look what happens. People are starting to go home, and we've gone from this peak, which is around the 12th. We're going right down here, and even the lorries, etc., the peaks are lower. It's like they've got less business to deal with. We then see that that it really builds up, and again over the bank holiday. I forgot to put graphs in on arrows in on this graph, but you can see here on the 28th of August, which is the bank holiday, that there's a real peak in terms of vehicular traffic in Nefyn on that period of time. When we get to a fawr, this is even more interesting. I think it was to do with the location, but mainly to do, there's a lot more vehicles going through this location. I've not used the Eisteddfod time because this just section of the graph to me is, dare I say, it's exciting, because what we've got here straight away is you can see the patterns of the vehicle traffic going past this location. This is day by day. So in the middle of the evening, it's very, very quiet, and it peaks. There's a small sort of pickup people finishing work earlier, and it drops right back down again to typically 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that goes on in its normal way. And guess what happens at the bank holiday weekend? One, the volumes increase enormously, and those troughs just don't seem to occur. Again, we see that sort of similar patterns happening around the 28th in terms of lorry traffic. And then after the bank holiday weekend, the pattern starts to return. And one of the things we see here as well is with lorries, that literally straight after the bank holiday on a Tuesday in the morning, they're all out doing their deliveries, etc., making up for lost business. This, it turns out, this strange gap here, where we don't see much activity, is because there's a creamery next door, and I think this is where there was something happening at the creamery, so they were using another exit. We need to look into that more, but that's trying to show you just what level of detail this gives. And you'll see as well when school starts that there tends to be a second peak in the daily transport where people are doing the school run in the afternoon. So we've always got to keep asking ourselves this question, why are we actually doing this? And it's because what we're presenting back to as information to the users of the system isn't good enough. We need to improve it. So here's Alan Lloyd, and he was crowned the Bard in the Eisteddfod in Bodleian on Friday the 11th. And this is where we're starting to look at the data from the Eisteddfod and people and usage. So what we're seeing here is the day of the Eisteddfod. And if we start to bring that in, the red graph there is pointing to, as far as I'm aware, the point in time where the big event of the Eisteddfod actually occurs. So we can see in the data just for vehicles, for cars, that there's just been a massive increase. Everybody rushing to get to the mice in order to see the big event. And then at the end of the event, a big splurge in activity here, as building up actually, literally from when the event finished, of vehicles coming. And then from that peak at just about 1800, it then drops down. Now, that's a specific event. We knew there was no other noise there. It wasn't an optimal location, but we're able to use the seismometer in a completely privacy compliant way to demonstrate human activity in the middle of a field on the Llŷn Peninsula. So what we needed to do was, if our footfall data is between 60 and 65% accurate, how can we improve on this without compromising data privacy using cameras, other methods? And this was the summary. I can't think of any other way to say this. I'm sorry. This is the summary of what we came out with. It's basically that we know that even though that we went back to that image of all the Sams and Shans and Dirks and Nigels with lots of different names, that even if we are counting in one place that there are 11,000 unique MAC addresses and 10,000 of them are randomized, that we know that there's a proportionality, i.e. if at 3 o'clock in the morning we see 1,500 and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon we see 11,000, we know that that is true, that there's an increase. So what we're able to now do with the seismometer data is we're able to use the frequencies that people generate when they walk to give us that loading factor, so that where our brilliant maths might think there's actually maybe 780 devices based on breaking it all down, we can use the seismology footfall data to smooth that, in essence. I think that's the simplest way to say it. And it can say, well, actually, it's 30% less noise now than when it was an hour ago. It's 50% more than it was this time yesterday, etc. So that is how we're going to be using seismology, microseismology, to help us understand more accurately how many people go into a place. So yes, that's me done. Question times, if anybody's still awake.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. William Minton, got your hand up? You're welcome to type or to unmute yourself and to ask out loud. Oh, questions here now. How is the data affected by adverse weather and road maintenance? Oh, that's really interesting.
Okay, adverse weather, well, there's two things there. Adverse weather, if it's things like thunder, well, that's a different frequency, so we're not looking for that. I think there's something called, you can see how sad we've become in microseismology, there's something called audio boom, and you can run that against data and it'll tell you when there's been thunder and lightning on the system. When it comes to roadworks, it's interesting. So the energy that's made by, so a good example here is we were concerned in the Nevin location because we were putting it near the cellar of the community pub called at Helywr, and there are lots of things like compressors and things like that, machinery in there. So we did some calibration because there's another device from one of the academics in Nevin. Unfortunately, the Fourier transforms we're doing just doesn't see that noise because it's only looking for specific frequencies. So without being too confident, I would hesitate, because the roadworks, typically things like compressors, generators, things like that, and the fact that you've got tracked vehicles, it wouldn't count it. If it was a JCB, perhaps we are counting it, yeah? But there's only one JCB, so yeah, I would imagine if it was a JCB or a dumper truck, we would be counting that as a vehicle. But we're only hoping to be 90% accurate, which is still good enough, I hope. One other thing, though, with weather is, as Kiki knows, the one thing that we're desperate to start generating data for is local weather. But that's because we see it has a massive impact across all the other data that we're monitoring. At the moment, all we can monitor is humidity and temperature. and it's not good enough. So that's somewhere we want to go.
Thanks for that, Paul, and thanks, William, for your question. You're saying thank you there as well. We've got another question from Ashley, who's asking, what sort of very rough cost would 10 shake units be with the system to support them?
Well, oh my God, we've never really done it as a commercial thing. We've just done it as a research project with Kiki. So you can buy, so first and foremost, you can buy a shake from a lovely man called Paul, not me, and I'm not lovely. And I think it costs about £500 for the basic model. We're only using the basic. We'd love to try the luxury model. We have aspirations. They're about £590, £600. In terms of us providing them, you know, when we get them, we've got to, and this is a reality of it, we have to provide our own code, because we want to make sure that the shake that is being used still pushes data to the original shake project, because that's the whole point of what we're doing, open data, sharing it, and it still needs to send data to us. Also, one of the things we've just been talking about with people from a national government not so far away from us is using these devices in places where there wouldn't be Wi-Fi. So things like using LoRaWAN. So we have to take the pie. We have to do some magic things to it. We have to add it to our own device system. We have to configure it, and we have to work with whoever's asking for it to find a suitable location, because that is one of our obsessions. You want to locate that pie somewhere where it's got good contact with the ground, where it's close enough to what you want to measure to make a difference. So I would say that you'd need to be looking at somewhere in the region of £1,200 a box, and then we'd need to talk about Patron, but we're here to make data open, not to make large amounts of profit. So hopefully we're very cost effective.
Great, thanks for that, Paul. Ashley saying thank you as well. I can see that someone is typing. I don't know, are people able to unmute themselves? You're welcome to ask anything out loud if you'd like to as well. Still see someone typing there. We've still got about 5 minutes. So are the devices just based off a standard Raspberry Pi box?
Yes, it's made in Newport or Bridgend, I can never remember which, and then it's shipped off to Belize, and it's then turned into a Raspberry Shake on the side of a volcano, which is quite apt, and then they're shipped all the way back to the nice man called Paul, who then ships them over to us. So I think you can build your own, but the costs are just we just get ours from the Raspberry Shake community.
And then second part of that question was, so is there the capability to add LoRa modules to the devices?
We're doing that now. So there isn't, but we're doing that because there's two use cases for us. One is from the geologist perspective, where they are looking to locate these, but they go to the, I wish someone had had a good careers teacher, because geology never really appealed. But God, when you see where geologists head off to, whenever you try to get hold of them, they're always somewhere like Chile or Iceland, or they don't, with all due respect, spend a day in Walsall ever. So I would, yes, I've forgotten where I was going there with the joys of that. Yes, the use cases. So the remote locations, they tend not to have good network connectivity. So what we've done with our developers as part of the next stages from this LoRaWAN project is we are doing edge processing on the unit, both for footfall, traffic, and also for seismic, so that they can then push the data out across a LoRaWAN network remotely. And that's also then applied back to the conversations we had earlier on today with the very close by national government, where we can use LoRaWAN to do things like, for instance, motorcycles have their own unique sound. Certain police forces would really like to know when a large number of motorbikes might be heading up the A5. You want to put these in good locations, and there won't be network connectivity. You've got LoRaWAN. So all we need is electricity and a decent LoRaWAN signal. So yes, you can. And we haven't got it working yet, but I'm hoping by the end of May we'll have the first units testing secretly on the A5.
Brilliant, thank you. Williams added there, great, cheers, that makes a lot of sense. You guys are having some very smart ideas.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And I think, Paul, you've got your hand up. Question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Paul. Very interesting talk. A couple of things are crossing my mind. You're using Raspberry Pis, and it sounds like there's the system that is almost off the shelf for you, but apart from the LoRaWAN. Is there an equivalent that you could use with an Arduino, because they link very easily with LoRa transmitter
Absolutely.
receivers?
Yeah. The technology stack is more about us. Like most things, it's good to use, particularly because of all the expertise we've shared with people from Brussels and Tokyo, etc. That's what they're using, and the community is awesome. It's as you always find in these different areas. So there's all these great Python libraries and everything's there, and it's something that they cherish. So we've gone with the Pi. I'd say that particularly if you were just doing it as a unit that would be connected directly to a network, probably the biggest question to me would be power supply, because the seismophone is quite a heavy beast. For instance, we can't power up on a Pi over PoE because as it spikes up, it uses too much power. And we've tried to do our own delayed boot thing so that we could try and manage the power process. So power would probably be the only thing. When it comes to actual edge processing and doing all the Fourier transforms on the unit and pushing data out, I'd have to say that probably my ignorance and Pi 4, Pi 5 snobbery would say it's just about pushing the envelope on a Pi. So I don't know enough about the Arduino, but to us, simpler is actually better. So, for instance, with the Wi-Fi stuff, we have the designs for very nice, neat Arduino units to do a very similar job. Because at the end they're so simple, they're easy to maintain. And the biggest bugbear for us at the moment is actually how do we manage tens of thousands of devices out in the field and be able to upgrade them? Because as we discovered with our particulate sensors, it's not easy if you make one mistake, which involves now driving around Gwynedd dealing with 27 particulate sensors. So yes, you can. I don't think they'd be precious. If you can run Python, you can do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Will is saying diddorol iawn, diolch yn fawr. We've got about a minute left if anyone has any other questions or comments. I'm sure Paul will be more than happy to answer any further questions offline as well. I'll share your email address afterwards if that's okay with you, Paul.
Of course it is, yeah.
Oh, you didn't have much of a wall of silence there, so I think that was a success.
No.
Brilliant.
Diolch.
Diolch. Thank you all. And yeah, I'll send over links in the next couple of days. But yeah, thank you all for joining. Thanks, Paul, and hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you.
Diolch. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.